Peace, 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 everybody. Uncle my aunt, resurrection, black power, free the land. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining us on June 2nd. We got another dope banger. And we're gonna get right into it. We got a really, really important organization and person gonna share some wisdom with our community today. So let's just jump into this. Oh, before we go into that, I'm Corey. I'm one of the co-founders of H.O.L.L.A. I'm the host today. Shout out to A-Rox and Alex. Shout out to Isaac in the background. D. Marissa, Black Art Butter Lab, Mashley, KJ, Eddie Ellis, Kathy Boudin, the Greenhaven Think Tank, the Bedford Hill Sisters. I was just with one of our elders, Baba Sekou. Shout out to the Black Liberation Army and the Black Panthers. We stand on legacy. And so I definitely want to bring, our elders, our ancestors, those that we name and don't name to this presentation, to this conversation. H.O.L.L.A, we've been organizing in that spirit to further develop Black liberation as a practice, to build our collective consciousness and our collective capacity to fight the war, right? And it's so much stuff going on in the world when we think about, bodies and people losing their life. And we talk about just, what is the African Mayafa? What are our elders and our ancestors and our current leaders and our circumstances teach us about the African Mayafa? Say that with me, the African Mayafa. And really talking about the destruction and of African cosmological origin story, really mapping how Europeans and Indo-Europeans enslaved and colonized African land, culture, and ancestors, right? And then we talk about the war, how it's sustained, how white supremacy is sustained through federal, state, city, societal institutions, right? And we see that it's, in our understanding that, when we carry that history into the present day, it's maintained through 4 layers and intersections of violence. We think about historical violence, and talking about how harm is passed from generation across generation, what it means to be carrying on the wounds and the hurt from your parents and their parents. And that also really gets to like the spiritual hurt, what it means to like not see your life or your pain as something to be acknowledged, what it means to go through generation when your pain is not acknowledged. Right? That's a spiritual pain in that historical stuff. And then we talk about structural violence. Some people call it institutional violence. Some people call it systems of oppression. How this history of colonization and enslavement is mapped up into the institutions that do not serve or, develop Black, brown, and indigenous people. And we talk about how we've been living in this system for generations now. And it's, it's in our interpersonal relationships. That, the way we mother, the way we father, the way we understand what a Black person is on internal level. So we talk about the interpersonal between each other, then we talk about the internal between ourselves. So, that's the war, man. And lately, while we've been organizing, doing healing circles, building curriculum, healing with our families, studying, land praxis, doing legacy tours across the country, we really started to think about over the last year, how do we focus more on the historical part of the war? So this right here is one of our Facebook Live series. This series right here is particularly called Black Land Sovereignty, with a focus on Black liberation. We got like 4 wonderful leaders in different parts of the world who's been, at least my teachers, and I think a lot of our teachers, when it comes to like, going back to nature, going back to the land, having a Black focus, and just been journeying, and also just been sharing and building that over the years. I've been seeing these people build and grow over the years as well. So we are fortunate to have this web series that's going to be sharing with the larger community. sharing with our families. We're gonna be asking our families to watch these videos back. We're gonna be sending these to some of our brothers in prison still that we in contact with. This is gonna help us further think about what questions come up in our own work, right? So, there's a lot of ways to go. We could be thinking about a particular skill, but we kind of went broad. We want to but we also, in stories, hopefully we get some of those wisdom in stories as well. So with that being said, man, I'm gonna pass it to our wonderful, wonderful guest and ask you to please explain who you are, what legacy brings you here, who your peoples are. And if you want to add on to the war, you want to add on to the context that our work is in, that your work is in. If you want to respond to anything I said about the war, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Corey, and thank you for having me and for everyone for joining. My name is Leah Penniman. I use all pronouns. I am one of the co-founders and farm director at Soul Fire Farm in Mohican Territory, also known as upstate New York. And we are an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm dedicated to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. We use our ancestral methods to grow food, to heal the land, to feed the community, to educate the rising generation of Black and Brown farmers, to work in solidarity with Indigenous community, to rabble-rouse for fair policies and institutions, and overall to try to make this world a place where it is safe for us to be fully actualized and where we have our agency and dignity as it relates to food and land. So I'm really moved by what you were saying, Corey, about this idea of violence being so intertwined with the story of our people, especially our people here on Turtle Island, on this continent. And there's so much to be said about that, but what I want to bring into the space is really thinking about the food and lands angle. A lot of folks don't realize that right now in this country, if you were to take all the land that can grow food, all of the farmland, 98% of that by value and 96% by acres is white owned. That means almost all the land that grows all the food that we consume is in the hands of one racial group. And that's actually a higher concentration of land in the hands of one racial group than ever before in history. And this is not an accident. This is not because Black people don't want land. You can trace back to what I would argue is the original egregious sin of this nation, the attempted genocide of Native peoples for stealing almost all the land in the first place. But it didn't end there. Take, for example, at the end of formal chattel slavery, 1865. 40 acres and a mule, that was a Black idea that came from Reverend Garrison Frazier and a group of Black ministers who were meeting with Sherman's army, trying to plan Reconstruction. And they said, what we need are homes and the ground beneath them so that we can plant fruit trees and say to our children, these are ours. That reparations was never given. It was given for a couple months, it was taken back. In fact, reparations were given to the former so-called slave owners for their so-called lost property. So Black people managed to purchase with their own money, even as sharecroppers, nearly 16 million acres of land by 1910 to 1920. That was 14% of the nation's farms. Almost all of that is gone. And it's gone because the Klan, the White Caps, the White Citizens Council attacked Black landowners for the audacity of leaving the plantation as sharecroppers and trying to establish their own businesses. This is why, Tulsa, Black Wall Street was burnt down, and Rosewood and countless other thriving, prosperous Black communities is because it was a threat to that white supremacist order. So 6 million Black people migrated, right, from the rural South to the urban North in hopes of escaping this racial terrorism. Of course, it took a different form. You have redlining, right? You have divestment of Black community. You have the housing discrimination, discriminatory zoning that kept Black people, in certain communities, certain zip codes where we couldn't purchase our homes because we did not have access to credit because redline neighborhoods the banks wouldn't lend to. And so you have this generational bleed out of wealth. You have the fact where your zip code becomes the leading determiner of your life expectancy, your incarceration rates, right? And in the rural communities, this is not over. It's not like everybody left, but the people who did stay, they're then facing discrimination by the federal government in form of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has led to foreclosures. They're facing land grabs by retirement companies that exploit the fact that a lot of times Black folks won't have a will. And so they'll take commons property. So it could go, there's books about this. I obviously am not going to talk about just this thing, but it strikes me because, as Malcolm X talked about, land is the basis of all revolutions. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. So if you actually do not have secure land tenure, you're not really in control of your house. You're not really in control of your food or your school or your water or your minerals or your clean air. It is the foundation of everything. And so the fact that Black people control only about 1% of the land, and when I say control, I question ownership in the capitalist structure. I'm talking about commons and land trust and all that is to me the ideal. But to think about having so little control fundamentally means that we are building sovereignty or imagine sovereignty on a shaky foundation, because that could be just ripped away at any time. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I think about a lot. And it's very real to me in a rural area out here where our literal safety as a community and our capacity to do our work depends on knowing that not only do we have the land that we have, but that we have some security that the land around us is in friendly hands. And so some control there too. And that's the only thing that makes it possible for Black and brown folks to be out here doing this work. We're a Black and Indigenous and Latina and Asian community out here in the midst of Trump flags flying and all that. And the title to land and the security to land is foundational to our safety and survival.
Thank you for that. Now, that was fire. And so a couple of things. So the first thing is, I know my son recently, him and one of our elders was studying similar to what you were saying, that how most of the land is in just white people's hand. And I was wondering, like, was COVID a big shift in any way? Is there anything to learn? Did that make more land accessible to like corporations in a certain way? But I felt like my son was talking about this like a year ago. And then I hear you say this, and I've been hearing it other ways. And I know we was all in the house during COVID and locked away, but I also know everybody was ordering Amazon and ordering Walgreens and I mean, just buying stuff in certain ways. But I'm just wondering, like, can COVID explain some of the shifts just of late, even though it's probably bigger than COVID? And but does COVID got a story in any of this?
It's a good question. I think anthropologists are going to have a blast with this like 10 years from now. So the short answer is I don't know what the home ownership trends are related to COVID. I do know that we're in a housing bubble, that the value of homes and land has gone up, which has made it inaccessible to people with less means who overlap often with folks of color because of that history of structural racism. I also know that there's a lot more interest in folks of color trying to get out to the rural areas because of experiencing the terror of being trapped, in their own homes, not having access to green space, fences around the basketball court, grocery store shelves empty, and then really saying, well, maybe it is time to think about what is growing my own food and all of that. I will say something that came out of COVID that is hopefully an enduring wake up is, for the first time, I saw a lot of folks who never questioned the industrial food system as their friend, starting to see its cracks laid bare. So what I mean by that is, you remember when there was bare shelves and shortages, we still have them in many communities, when the meat packing plants were shutting down because of COVID outbreaks, when they couldn't process the animals, so they were slaughtering them and throwing them into ditches, when recall after recall. So there was so much trust placed in this capitalist system because there's an illusion of efficiency. And it is true that type of system can be very efficient if everything goes exactly the way that they plan it. Every box is the same. But as soon as there's a disruption, there's no resiliency. And something so powerful that I saw is all these small farms, justice-oriented farms, Black-led farms, community farms, they could shift and adapt within 24 hours to the new situation. They'd be like, oh, okay, the school is closed. That's cool. We're going to go online. Or, the restaurant's closed. No worries. We're doing doorstep deliveries to the neighbors. So these mutual aid groups started to pop up all around the community, making sure that everybody gets fed, making sure that everybody has their supplies, that no one's left alone. Medicines are getting out to the community. And just like nature So I'll say this, I believe in a sacred or cultural biomimicry, always looking to what does nature do? How do we copy? Nature does not do efficiency, factory, everything the same, right? It's small, it's diverse, it's adaptable. And I think when we think about how do we create this world we want to see, the food system, the land system, the community systems have to have that adaptability and resiliency, because that allows us to be like, oh, pandemic, okay, we turn right here. Oh, okay, tsunami, we're gonna turn left here. You know, we're not stuck into this sort of forward assembly line mindset, which really only feeds profit and doesn't actually serve our community. So that's the biggest change I saw in COVID, and people have kept up a lot of those mutual aid networks. So that makes me feel hopeful.
Now, I feel like that's shout out to the brother Jeff in Mount Vernon. I feel like that's what the brother Jeff and then was doing in Mount Vernon, like working on trying to like reclaim a abandoned lot in Mount Vernon, but also been giving out produce every Tuesdays to like working
Beautiful.
with some folks who are donating the produce or donating money so they're not even paying, they just got relationships that is helping bring certain things to the community. And it's funny you say that, because the brother was talking about how they's back to working now, and that like it's harder for them to find that day to keep that going. So I think that's also really important. And I seen his struggle, like, yo, I really want to make sure I get one day at least. But I was there today with him on a space, and mad community members like, yo, so you're gonna be at Fridays too? You're gonna be on Saturdays? So I think what you're saying is really critical, is that like it's good to see people doing that and keeping that going. And I'm pretty sure with people getting a regular life or job back going, and we're not just in the same COVID zone as we was, that it might be also harder for people to volunteer, to dedicate those hours like that, to kind of like just focus on that in a certain way. So we just want to send that energy to that struggle for those of you who keep doing that and who are still doing that. We need that to happen. Talking about Black land sovereignty with a focus on Black liberation and farming while Black, like for how the last 6 years, we've been slowly, largely, big ways, little ways, thinking about what it means to travel back to land. And that's been, I remember the first time we went to land like 5 or 6 years ago, we was like, it's cold outside, it's this, it's that. And now we're a little bit more used to that, but it's still so much to learn about, and still so much trauma to get over. Like, you sure you ready to go back there? And we've kind of been doing this for a couple of years, and Spirit's been open to doing this. I still have to say that when we bring our mothers, our wives, our young people over these last 5 or 6 years, for the most part, like it's really, people might want to do, people might do it. It's hard to get people to land. People might enjoy it for that weekend, but they super ready to go back. You know what I'm saying? Like people be tight about their phones. So it's like, it's like I might do it to whatever hell or do something, but I ain't trying to live there. I ain't trying to like build, like plant and take care of animals and think about, how we build a well and how we think about a greenhouse. So when I think about, when you talk about Malcolm X and talking about how land is important, and then how you talk about like we are nature, that, we should be learning from nature. And then I think about historical trauma. I think about just where Black people are at. Like it's kind of like courage to be like, I'm a farm while I'm Black. You know what I'm saying? Like even for Black people in your own family, like, yo, or brown people, at least in my experience. So I really want you just to talk to our audience and also talk to us more about like, what is that? What does it mean? Why is that? You can kind of go into like, why is that important for liberation? But really, what does it mean to farm while it's Black? Why you Black? What is a Black land praxis? Just what does that mean? So people can kind of probably get understanding. People probably don't always know about what that means.
Wow, that question is deep and multifaceted. Okay, so let me start with this. My comrade, Chris Bolden Newsom, who's a farmer at Sankofa in Philadelphia, Black farmer, dear friend, he said the land was the scene of the crime. And I responded, but she wasn't the criminal. So the reason I want to start with that is because there is no doubt that the centuries of land-based oppression, we're talking about chattel slavery, we're talking about sharecropping, we're talking about convict leasing, We're talking about the Klan rolling up and burning down farmers' houses. We're talking about USDA discrimination. There's no way that does not leave an indelible mark, even a mark on our epigenetics that's passed down from parent to child. I will tell you that there'll be young, Black children who come to the farm, and they're maybe 4 or 5 generations away from the plantation, and they roll up and they're like, y'all aren't slaves, are you? So like that is so deep that, our folks, for good reason, many of them fled the red clays of Georgia for the paved streets of Pittsburgh and Boston and New York. But I think subsequent generations, including ours, are realizing that we didn't just leave behind the scene of the crime, we also left behind a piece of our culture, our heritage, our belonging, many of us go around with this sense of emptiness, there's something missing, we can't quite name it. And I would argue it's the relationship with the earth. And the reason I say that is because a lot of folks think of earth stuff as like white people stuff, organic farming as white people stuff. But if you look at, I wrote a book, it's called Farming While Black. If you look at every single technique that is used by organic farmers in order to grow healthy food, take care of the earth, you can trace it back to African peoples, from Dr. George Washington Carver, the Black farmer, founder of the organic movement in the 1890s out of Tuskegee. Whether you talk about Cleopatra, as well as the women of Ghana and Liberia who refined composting systems, whether you talk about the Ovambo people of Namibia who made raised beds, whether you talk about the Haitians who taught us how to farm on hillsides, it goes on and on. So this is part of the reason I wrote this book, because I said, there's no way that our folks didn't have some contribution here besides just being in chains, taking orders. Even in the United States, all of the rice growing in the Carolinas, that came from the Senegambian people, the Mende and the Wolof. They were rice farmers in Africa. They were kidnapped for their expertise in rice farming and brought to set it up in the Carolinas. You remember these the colonizers were from Northern Europe. They didn't know how, they never grew no sugar cane. They never grew, rice. They didn't grow, any of these these tropical crops. These were crops that were known by Indigenous and Black people how to grow. So they were taking the expertise, not just the labor. And I think that there is a way that we get to tune back in, like catch up to where our ancestors left off and move on from there. And it's not just about the physical techniques, there's a spiritual cosmology. If you look at our traditional religions before Christianity bumped in, or even Islam, these are indigenous African religions that teach us that the earth is mother, that teach us that the earth is Orisha, that she is God, that our ancestors talk to us, that the land will talk to us, advise us, protect us. We give offerings, we ask permission. So there's a way of awakening all of this, starts to fill that hole that isn't just about the food in our bellies, but about a psycho-spiritual hunger that needs satiating. And I'll say that, when we started Soul Fire Farm, we thought we'd be alone out here too, because I believe the myth. I was like, Black people don't want to farm. I'm just a weirdo. I'm just going to come out here anyway. We'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. The line was around the block to get into these programs from jump. And it has been so beautiful to see like what kind of internal sovereignty is awakened just spending a week or a couple weeks on the farm with other Black and brown folks, learning about this history, learning the technologies, the techniques. So I think that, it's not going to be for everybody, but part of the praxis is understanding the noble history of Black people's relationship to lands, doing the grieving we need to do about the breaking of that relationship, and doing that in a culturally safe container with other folks who are going to hold us and reflect back our goodness and all of that. And, not everyone's going to be a farmer, but everyone eats. Everybody lives on land. So we all have a piece of it. You might be like a food business person, or you might be an advocate, or you might just be a conscious consumer, or maybe you're going to donate to Corey's Land Project, but we can't ignore it. We are here on this earth. We can't ignore the earth. That doesn't make any sense. So I think we all just have to find our place in it. And some people will fall.
Like the earth is like God, man. That's more. We better like get back on point. We better like learn from it. We better watch it. We better study.
I should.
Better listen to it. I think who was it? George Carver.
Dr. George Washington Carver. Mm-hmm.
Right, who's listening to the plants.
So we need to tell this story because this is incredible. This is the late 1890s to early 1900s. He was one of the founding faculty of Tuskegee University, one of the premier Black institutions, in the history of this country. The students built the school brick by brick. There's a lot to say about Tuskegee. but something, Dr. Carver's famous for the peanut. If you ever go to a elementary school Black History Month, you're going to see a picture of him and a peanut because he made like 3,000 peanut inventions. But a lot of people don't realize the reason he cared about the peanut is it's a legume, and legumes in collaboration with bacteria actually fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. They heal the soil, and he was trying to heal the soil. He's an organic farmer, but he got that idea because every morning he went out at 4 a.m. into the woods to talk to God through the flowers, the trees, the ferns. He used the tree as a telephone to God. And then God would download the instructions, like, here's what you need to do with peanuts. And then he'd go do it and like change the world. Absolutely such a spiritual, beautiful being, the way that he had figured out how to tune into the divine through nature.
Shout out to the ancestor. That was beautiful.
Ashe.
So you kind of already went into it, but anything else you want to say about historical trauma, historical violence, either the healing from or just the pain of it as it relates to like Black land sovereignty? I think you already said a lot about it, but anything
well,
else?
Let me say about the trauma from the eating perspective too, because I think there's the land and the sort of producer side, but we also, all of us eat. And a lot of us eat the standard American or Western diet. And a lot of us, think that we love the standard American or Western diet. But if you look back to our ancestral diets, and there's some beautiful work out of the Heritage Network where it has food pyramids made for different indigenous cultures. So instead of the USDA with the pasta and the milk and the steak and all that, an African food pyramid at its base will be leafy greens, tubers like yams, cassava. Then there'll be palm oil and fish. There'll be like peanut. There'll be lots of spices. Lots of spices are part of the diet. And I mention that because part of what got stolen from us in that journey is the connection to our ancestral foods, which not only are delicious, but they also make our bodies whole and healthy and strong. And on the standard American diet, a lot of us are sick. Black and brown communities are disproportionately impacted by heart disease, kidney failure, diabetes, depression, mental illness is also diet related. Many cancers are diet related. And so not only are we divorced from that diet, a lot of times we don't even understand that, eating leafy greens is a Black thing, and not just collards, all kinds of leafy greens. But then, by being ghettoized into these certain zip codes, these food deserts or food apartheid, we call it, because the desert is a natural phenomenon and apartheid is a human created system. So in a food apartheid situation, you have a few dollars in your pocket, you can go to the corner store, you can get hot Cheetos, or you can get some kind of blue flavored artificial drink, but you can't get, your fufu and stew or your amala, you can't get these foods that your ancestors ate that will actually fortify you and make you strong enough to be well and also to resist. And this is the key point I think gets missed a lot is that, I don't know about you, but if I'm feeling unwell, if I'm dealing with chronic illness, I'm not trying to run for city council. I'm not trying to show up at the protest. I'm like stuck on a dialysis machine. I'm not trying to think about, what nonprofit I'm going to start to change. And so by keeping the population weak, by pumping corn syrup into the veins of our children, so to speak, and keeping them weak and tired and lethargic, it also keeps the population under control. So by figuring out how to reclaim those ancestral foods and, start our farms and land and get that food into our bellies and sort of wake our bodies back up, not only does it help us personally, but as like a community, then suddenly we have the vibrancy and the alertness to be like, oh, wait, there's some work to do and I have energy to do it. I'm gonna get to that like liberation work. So I think that our eating and our health is more than just, a number on a scale or your cholesterol levels. It's also about the capacity of the Black community to build our collective future.
Now that's dope. That's dope. Here go a question. This just came to me just now. In your study or just understanding of like, and maybe this is related to like, I remember you saying during sharecropping time, we kind of had about 16 million acres of land, which was like 14%. Maybe during that time, I'm thinking, so yeah, how did part of what I'm saying, like what was our eating habits around that time? When when do you like, is there a particular, and I know we was in, particularly in the United States of America context, we kind of like start here not really start here, but like after 1492, we kind of like in chattel slavery. So our access to kind of food is different then. But thinking after so-called Emancipation Proclamation, 1865, and then definitely after the Reconstruction era, is there times after that where like, because I would assume back then, even we probably wasn't eating as healthy as we was eating before enslavement, but I'm pretty sure we still probably have more knowledge of like leaves and stuff. And even me growing up in Mississippi, I hear my aunties and grandmas, like, and I was born in the 80s, still saying, go do this, go in the backyard, do that. So I could just imagine, but is there a point where I'm getting, is there like a particular point like, yo, after the Ku Klux Klan and like the 1900s, all that was going on, the Great Migration, not the first one, the second one, we lost it, like it was really going. Like, is there like a moment that you could like feel like you could see like, oh, we just started eating all kinds of corn chips and fried, and stuff after that?
It's such a good question. So I don't know. I'm not a food historian. I would guess that probably like all hope was lost somewhere around the 1950s. But I will say that, you mentioned sharecropping and nutrition. I think it's important to say that, it's always a combination of like our knowledge and desire, but also our access. So during sharecropping, it was some of the worst nutrition. In fact, so much so that a very rare disease called pellagra was rampant amongst Black communities, which is a niacin deficiency, which means you basically like eating so poorly, but not because it's fried food or processed food. There's just not enough to eat. There's not enough, vegetables or meats or anything that's going to give you the minerals that you need. And same thing under slavery. A lot of times the rations was a little bit of like, pork fat and some cornmeal, and then you had to grow the rest if you could find the time in your own provision garden. All that to say, though, I think the knowledge was still there because people would forage wild greens. They would eat turnip greens. They would turn the waste trimmings from, the quote master's plate into foods. And so I think many of us have grandparents or even great grandparents who are still alive who can give you recipes. And a lot of them are adaptations of West African. We don't have yams here, but we have sweet potatoes. We don't have the tete or yanreen, like certain green vegetables, but we have collard greens. So there's ways that those ideas were just transferred. We don't have the groundnut or the bambara, but we have the peanut. So those ideas, they live on. And there's amazing chefs, like I love the work of Michael Twitty. I love the work of Bryant Terry, who have tried to wake up that ancestral knowledge of Black culinary history and give us some recipes that we can do, like right now today with the things we can get at the supermarket that reach back to that time of, of Whole Foods and all that. So yeah, definitely. If you haven't gotten like Afro Vegan Soul and all those books, you got to get those cookbooks.
I didn't get that one. I need that African. Let me write that down. African.
Yeah, basically all of Bryant Terry's, but my favorite one is Afro Vegan Soul. He also makes a soundtrack. And hi, Brian. Hopefully you hear this shout out because he's a friend of mine too. But he puts a soundtrack, so you have like a song that you can play while you're making, like a playlist for every recipe that goes with theme.
That's love right there. I love when when somebody's putting love into their art, into their craft. Thank you, Brian. Is that Brian Perry?
Bryant Terry, like with a T, Bryant Terry. Mm-hmm.
So we also might have my dog in the background, Leah. I don't know what she's talking about, man. Thank you so much for that. I just had I almost lost. That was go. So that was good. Thank you for that. Here go my next question. Kind of thinking about Malcolm X talking about how land is critical to just freedom, liberation. I know Fannie Lou Hamer also was really thinking about like land and sharecropping and how to like organize so that sharecroppers could like build their own power amongst themselves. The New Republic of Africa, they was trying to get land in like 5 states down south, like Louisiana, South Carolina. They was going to Mississippi. They was going to the real states. Like, yo, we need that back. And then you also had like, people, the civil rights movement, maybe Martin and the large majority of the civil rights movement, they was talking about laws and policy, but they wasn't really talking about land all the way. Also, even right now, we got a lot of people doing all kinds of work, gun violence work, doing circle work, doing restorative justice work. And I feel like a lot of our works are, and this is my critique about the nonprofit, because it's like in mad like intersections and sectors. Mm-hmm. And all of those areas are important. So it's not to minimize them things, but but part of what I'm saying is there's like a historical story where like Malcolm, certain people who are doing some of this work, speaking law policy, they also services, but they also saying we got to have land. But also let me add another part. A lot of people that that also is deeply into doing land work, sometimes y'all be so far up there. I don't know if y'all like in the urban stuff. So that's also, and it's like, and I know what it is. I can imagine, I seen y'all working, building greenhouses. So I can imagine it's like just a lot too, like how it's a lot for people in the urban stuff. Like, y'all ain't got time to, so I'm doing all the laws and policies and services. What I ain't got time. So my question is like, is there, H.O.L.L.A been really it's over there. H.O.L.L.A been really thinking about, that's why we've been slow, and it ain't really slow, but like we've been questioning and studying, like, how do we make that bridge? How do we still be in the 7 neighborhoods? How we still be doing circles, summits, open mics, all of this, but also how do we understand all of the importance of nature, the importance of herbs, the importance of retreating, the importance of having access to water, the importance to like generational healing and generational sustainability that could come from reconnecting to land in a good way. Mm-hmm. So, but like, yeah, like, so what is your thoughts on that? Like, what do you see? What do you understand from history, from right now? What would you just, share about that?
I love your question. So first of all, I'll just say it off the bat, they're not mutually exclusive. And yes, we do urban stuff and vice versa. But I want to go back to Fannie Lou Hamer because I think this is a really good example. We all know Fannie Lou Hamer of the Mississippi, Freedom Democratic Party, like badass organizer, civil rights movement. A lot of people do not know about her lands work, which very much came out of, people would laugh at her. They'd be like, Miss Hamer, they go to her house for organizing. And she has all these canned pears and stuff like up on her shelf. They're like, why are you wasting time with these gardens and these cans? And she said, if you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around or tell you what to say or do. So she saw this controlling your own food supply as foundational to your political autonomy. And this really came to bear when, folks who were sharecroppers, which
can you say that again? Rewind that. Bring that back. That was too smooth. Bring that back again.
If you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around or tell you what to say or do. Right? Because you're in control of your food. But as soon as, you think about it, as soon as they lock up that grocery store and you ain't got no formula for your baby, you would go groveling on your hands and knees, giving away this and that and your own soul, right, to get the food. And so she was noticing that sharecroppers who went to register to vote, and mind you, a sharecropper does not own their land, right? They're a tenant and they owe the white landowner a share of the harvest at the end of the year. That's how they pay for the house, the clothes, the seed, everything.
Yeah.
When they went to register to vote, they would come home and find all their stuff thrown out in the street. They suddenly were homeless and jobless. So Fannie Lou Hamer bought a piece of land so that all these kicked out sharecroppers could be owners. They all came together as co-owners of a co-op called Freedom Farm Cooperative in Sunflower County, Mississippi. And they worked together, right? So there's a lot to say about that, but I want to sort of like jump forward to today because I think sometimes we get stuck in the zero sum where it's like, well, which is better? Working on gun violence, doing healing circles, being a public school teacher, farming. And the answer is we actually need all of it. My favorite model of social justice transformation is this butterfly. It's got 4 wings. One is the resistors. These are like protest, blockade, boycott, all the BS, try to interrupt the machine, right? Then we have the reformers. Those are people working within the system, trying to get community policing or run for office, petitions, that type of thing. We have the builders, people creating alternative institutions like farms, co-ops, land trusts, their own freedom schools. And then we have the healers who are trying to deal with the trauma and the circles. A butterfly cannot fly with 1 wing or 2 or 3. It needs all 4. And so it's not about which one, but it's about building coalitions that are big enough that we can hold all those wings. So while Soulfire Farm, we do some policy work, we do some urban gardens work, some of that. that's not our focus, but we work in coalition. We're part of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. We're part of the H.O.L.L.A Food Alliance. We're part of the Northeast Black Farmers ecosystem. And so when we work together, and I'll be very concrete about this, like, you know, if we train farmers, Black Farmer Fund is going to make sure they have money. Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust is going to make sure they have land. Corbin Hill Food Project will make sure they have a market. And Black Farmers United will make sure that they have a political advocate. So you need to build coalitions that are big enough that are you can hold all of these pieces, you know, towards like that vision of community, and not think Hala has to do it all or that Corey has to do it all. Maybe Corey's like the circle guy and like, you know, someone else on your team is the goat herder, and that's fine. You just support each other, you know?
Shout out to that. Shout out to Carbon Hill Farms, and shout out to all of the sisters and brother
organizations.
Yeah. That is beautiful. So what's up, folks? I don't know. We can't see no questions. So we just in our own portal, our own Zoom. I hope y'all enjoying yourself out there. I'm definitely like, what? Let me ask this question. I'm learning a lot. And Leah is a really good storyteller. We just got some really dope storytellers of our elders, ancestors. And, you know, part of the reason why H.O.L.L.A been doing legacy tours, and that's been to fight against historical trauma too. And these legacy tours been going to historical memorial sites where our peoples, you know, build work. So that even make us think about going to Dr. Carver, going to the Tuskegee Institute, because there's so much wisdom there. And we have circles at these locations. But part of the reason why we've been doing this is because we just have lost and have been removed from so much of our wisdom, nature, land, analysis, etc. So when you tell those stories, I think you just teach us so much, even about Fannie Lou Hamer so much. So thank you for that.
I need to hear these stories about these circles and these sites too. I hope you're going to talk about them in some of your lives coming up.
Yeah, shout out to that. So let's give a plug to that. So I think that's going to be like late July. We're going to have our preliminary findings of our, we already did about 12 legacy tours. We went to Egypt / Kemet. We're going to end off in Chicago for this first round of analysis on July. We go to Chicago early July. And then the end of July, we're going to be talking about what we learned across that process. So yeah, that's going to be on Instagram or Facebook. So thanks for that shout out. So where we going with this question? So I think, I still think a lot of organizations who are doing really important work, even though I think the butterfly analysis, I agree with that. I think there's also still a certain level of, you know, I don't know how to name it. Like, I think some people are so into their work that, like you said, they just in their lane. Other people probably don't think land and connected to land and understand all the teachings behind it. So they might say it's not that important. So, you know, for those, you know, for that piece of our cosmology that like still is missing something about land, doing great work, doing dope services, you know, maybe even doing circle work, maybe doing teaching work. And this is for our mom. I'm thinking about Mississippi too. I'm about to go to Mississippi in June. June 14th. And like you said, we done been so uprooted from the land through laws, through sharecropping, through stealing, through taxes, through colonization. And even people in Mississippi, I think, who are still kind of on the land in a certain way, it's a way different kind of relationship to land.
Right.
And they got some of the worst, like they supermarkets and they're institutional, the way institutional violence play out in the context of Mississippi and places like that. They also supermarkets kind of always got the worst vegetables, the worst tomatoes, like literally like all the time. And like the communities where most of my family grew up at, you probably got to go somewhere else to find something that ain't looking crazy. And I would assume that's in places like Alabama too, Arkansas. I would assume in places like that. So what is the, you know, how do we get us to just think about, and I think we all at different places of understanding land is God, that, what you can learn from nature, that like, there's a lot of healing with being on the land, from the foods you eat, how that relates to your consciousness, to who you be, but also just to generational healing and sustainability. So there's so many people, I think people are in different places of understanding, and different places of not caring, and different places of blind spots. So I just want to throw out some more hope to us, man. So, what hope can you give us? What truth can you give us? Why is it important to, like, just, from wherever, you want to go from, just to bring some more spirit back to grandmoms, to aunties, to people in prison who, like, growing up eating school lunch, now you eating prison lunch. Just in so many ways that, like, the way that going back to nature and land from all of our contexts that land on us in certain ways. So yeah, I think, just give us some hope, give us some energy, give us some
no pressure, give us some hope. I mean, I'm thinking about what you said, and your point about the terrible food in the grocery stores in these farming communities, I think underscores it really well. I mean, just flip it around. We can ask ourselves, do we trust this white supremacist, capitalist, heteropatriarchal society to feed us? Do we trust this society that has proven how much it hates Black people to house us, to feed us, to clothe us? And if we don't trust them to do that well, then how could we avoid trying to take some ownership in the food system? I'm not saying everyone has to be a farmer, but we should care that there are Black farmers. We should care that there are Black, landowners who are building, have housing and businesses and things. And so I think there's a piece there, but as far as the spiritual piece, it can't be articulated abstractly. So I will say, we do youth programs here as well as adult, and a lot of the young people are super skeptical about coming out to a farm. There was this one young man, he's now grown, and he tells me I can tell this story, but when he was maybe 12, 13, Kareem, he came to this farm and he would not get out of the van. He's like, I don't know, I'm getting eaten by a bear, I'm just not getting out of the van. And then when everyone went off on the tour, he got nervous being left alone, so he changed his mind because he'd rather be with us and we die together, than die alone. But he had like perfect white J's, like beautiful sneakers, and it's mud. So there's another conundrum. So I said, well, I was kind of half joking. I was like, just go barefoot. He's like, word, I'm gonna go barefoot so I don't ruin my shoes. So he takes off his shoes, he's going barefoot. All the kids start going barefoot too. And these are Albany, urban kids, but small city. And they're all going barefoot. They're not listening to anything on the tour because they're squealing, it's mud and there's like snakes and worms and all this stuff. So we get back to debrief and have a circle. And Kareem says, Miss Leah, this is going to sound crazy, but when my bare feet was on the earth, I could feel like this energy come up. And as my grandmother, she passed away when I was little, and she like came up and started talking to me. And when I first got here, I was thinking I have like nothing to do with the land, the earth, none of this stuff. But she came to me and she was reminding me, like she put this like worm in my hand or something. We were gardening together. She was telling me that, this is what I need to do to heal. So he's telling this story. He gets all misty eyed. And then the other kids are talking about their grandparents, and they ended up making a film about their grandparents and the connection to land that had been lost. So I mentioned that because this young person wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to a farm and get liberated or anything. But I think it's only through the earth has to claim you, and she will if you're open. She will come and claim you, and that's something we'll stir. I just had some friends, some Black friends from Albany. They came to visit a few months ago, and I just got an email today that was like, "We're buying land right near you." I said, "What?" They were like, "Yeah, it happened. That thing you talked about, it happened. It just grabbed us. we coming out. We coming out to the earth." It's like, all right, we'll be here to help you through your first winter.
That was a beautiful story. Thank you for that. Shout out to that young person, and shout out to the ancestors, man. Shout out to the ancestors, and shout out to nature. And I seen a question. Do you got any thoughts about how somebody could start off small, trying to acquire land in the city?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you how to start off even smaller, because I think that you got to start with success, and you got to start with falling in love with bringing forth life, being a collaborator with Earth, who is God, to bring forth life. And you can start with a single jar on your windowsill and just sprout some like broccoli seeds or collard seeds or mung bean seeds. And you can go to our website. We have a garden guide that explains this and some videos. But you can just grow your own salad in a jar, or you can get, some takeout containers, put some clean soil and sprinkle some lettuce seed or some radish seed. You're going to get microgreens. You can start cutting those. So I always tell people, just start growing something. You're going to fall in love. You can grow mushrooms in your own house, all different kinds, woody or shiitakes. You can grow those in your closet. And then you're harvesting your food. You taste how good it is, how alive. Your kids get excited. Then you're like, oh, now maybe I'm going to put some, don't tell the city, but I'm going to put some on my fire escape, some pots of tomatoes or on the soup. And then you need more, right? And so start small, but absolutely in the city, some of the easiest way is join a community garden, because they already cleaned it out for you. You get a garden plot. Buying your own land a lot of times more expensive. So try to go in with somebody, like a group of folks, and then you can get your own, get a lot on auction. When people don't pay their taxes, they put the lots up. See if you can grab one of those, clean it up, build your garden, and then pretty soon you're going to be upstate because you ran out of space to grow all your stuff. So then call me and I'll help you find land up here.
Nah, that's what we're trying to do. We definitely trying to get that popping this year. So thank you for throwing that out. And everybody else, man, let's try to get back to the land in some way. We don't got to be farmers. We connect the farmers. Let's just try to get, probably it's just us getting healthier produce. Maybe it's getting retreat spaces to get wellness going on. Maybe it's just learning all of these dope stories about our elders and land and political education and knowledge, so that we could just keep sharing that in the work that we do. But there's so many ways that, we could connect back to Black land sovereignty with a focus on Black liberation in all of our works. Any other feedback for young people, young adults? I think that story was dope, but like anything you want to just, we focus with young people, 12 to 30, coming from the neighborhoods that feed the prison system the most, and coming from, like I said, the war, like a lot of interpersonal violence in their communities at home, but also a lot of love, a lot of strength, and a lot of journey. We be on corners, we be on blocks, we be on, now we be on Facebook Lives, but we don't really be hitting that land and hitting that nature like that. So anything you want to shout out to our young people in the community?
Yeah, I would say to our young people, and I have, my daughter's 19, my son is 17. And I taught high school for almost 20 years. I love young people. Whatever they say about y'all, it's lies. I will just say you're worth it. When I talk to a lot of young people about, eating these healthy foods or growing gardens, a lot of the feedback I'll get is like, Miss, what's the point? We're going to be dead or in prison anyway. So you're trying to tell me, eat this stuff because when I'm 50, I'll be, healthy. Maybe I'm not even going to be 50. Okay. And so I think there's a way that they've convinced our young people they have no future. Their only hope is to get some temporary satisfaction from being a consumer, accumulating, but not to really think long-term, not to think about, the way we used to think. We used to think about 6, 7 generations. We'd be like, oh, I'm going to get this land. I'm going to plant these trees so that my grandchildren, right, can have this. Right. And they've beat that out of us by making us think we have no future and that we're not worthwhile. So I think the fundamental work for our young people is to understand that you're worth it. You're worth believing in the future. You're worth having land to stand on. You're worth filling your body with nourishing foods, investing in your education. Like, there is a future for you because these adults in H.O.L.L.A and Soulfire have got your back, and we're going to try to make sure to protect you so that you can start to think beyond just the next video game or the next fix or the next like cutie or whatever you're trying to do, and really think like far. What is my dream? How do I want to be remembered when I die at a ripe old age? And how do I want my grandchildren to be remembered? And what is my legacy? And what is the society? That's where I want our young people to believe that they do have this possibility to create any world that they can envision, and that we will support them in doing that.
Yes, thank you for that. thank you for that. I needed some of that too, so thank you. And with that being said, we would I think we're gonna wrap up with that, man. I think we're gonna wrap up with that. What I'm gonna say is thank you so much, Leah, for joining us. We met Leah in 2017, and we went there a couple of times since then, the Soulfire Farm. And we also just recently applied to one of y'all fellowships.
Beautiful.
And we always ask y'all questions. We always try to check in. So is there any, we always seeing y'all on Facebook and just seeing the work y'all doing and just trying to like, just keep that in our spirit, try to learn from you all. So is there anything else you want to share about what y'all doing, what's going on, any updates for Soulfire, anything that people should know about? Once again, from all of our team, all of the people you've seen on many trips and many stuff, we just say thank you for all those times. And thank you again for showing up right here. And I want you to just, if you got anything you want to share, outside of this conversation that people even know, we want to make sure you.
Beautiful. Well, first of all, thank you. This has been so enlivening and definitely has like re-inspired me and reinvigorated me to do the work. It's not easy work, I'm not going to lie to y'all. So I really appreciate that. You can follow Soulfire Farm on all the social media platforms. It's Soulfire Farm, just all one word. Our website is soulfirefarm.org. We have volunteer opportunities. We have a reparations map. So the people who are Black and brown folks who are trying to get their projects funded, you can apply to be listed. And folks who are trying to be an allyship, you can fund those projects. We have a lot of free resources, how to garden, how to set up your farm, how to find land. We got Farming While Black, the book, and a new book coming out next year called Black Earth Wisdom, which is about the spiritual stuff and about like Black people's relationship to the planet that we're on. So yeah, check us out, be our friend, come visit us. We try to be anything we've learned that can help our people, we're just gonna share it with you. So don't hesitate to reach out and we'll try to do our best to support you.
Thank you. Peace Facebook Live. This was once again a banger. I can't wait to rewatch this and definitely get some of them stories down packed, man, and go back into some of those stories. Also, please share this. Please let somebody watch this in your family. Please watch it with a cousin, with a partner. Please bring it to your organization meeting. It don't got to be the whole thing. Like, let's watch this question right here. Let's focus on this question right here. We are trying to just study this wisdom. We got 3 more coming up. We got Black Women's Blueprint. Shout out to our big sisters. We got Medicine Bowl with Kifu. Shout out to our big sister. And we also got our peoples in Oakland from Camp Achille. So we are hoping to have these conversations keep, adding on to each other. And we are appreciated for the people that shared their time with us today, online, offline, our ancestors. And have a good, blessed day. Thanks, Isaac, again in the behind the scenes. And thanks, Alex and A-Rocks, for all of the work that they've been doing to keep our work going, man. And we appreciate you all. Peace.
Peace out.